Can't use this guy because it mutilates it. But if you're just trying to save the panel underneath it, this is perfect. Jump in this thing and see what it'll do.
Ready to rock this, bro?
Oh, hell yeah. Hey guys, well today I'm going to answer one of the most common questions I get all the time and show you how I use the tools to do it. So right here I have a crusty rusty shitbox 1970 Charger. The only thing that is worth saving off this car, and I'm going to rebuild this car just by using nothing but the roof structure, some of the package tray, what's left of the inner wheel wells, the rear seat pan, and the window regulator panel. That's the only thing worth saving off this hunk of junk. But that question I get asked all the time is, what do I use to tear the cars apart? Spot weld cutters, seam busters, all that stuff. And I've got my whole arsenal right here. And I use all of I have used all of these on this car, and I'm still using these. Let's see. Right off the bat, got my little bottle torch. I've got my drill with a wire wheel on it. I've got a 3-inch angle grinder with a, basically just a cutoff wheel on it, but it's a thicker cutoff wheel. This actually, I use this the most. We've got a Blair spot weld cutter, which is actually on this drill bit right here. I also use this a lot too. We've got the auger. I use this for, say I use the spot weld cutter, and I do, let's see if I can find one somewhere that I may have done. Okay, well instead of searching, I'll just, oh wait, I did use one right here. So sometimes the spot welds are wider, they're like an oval, they're not exactly a perfect circle. So you'll go in there with a spot weld cutter, and then you'll just kind of open it up with this guy. So you get your oval shape, and it cuts the spot weld. Another one I use, but I don't use too often, but I do use it, is this guy right here. This is a kind of like a hole saw spot weld cutter. This is also from Blair. I use this when I want a perfect circle, and I don't really want to waste the bit on this guy. This actually works much better. This is much cheaper. So I use this when I want a nice flush cut, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. So yeah, I do use this. This is my seam buster. This is for, actually yeah, right here. This is for busting those spot welds loose. So you'll go ahead and hammer that sucker in there and bust those spot welds loose. And you can also use this guy. I use it, actually I just used this yesterday right here. So I'll stick it in through the edge here, and then I'll hammer it down, busting it all the way down. Of course, hammer. And then this is actually one of my newest tools. This is the Milwaukee band file, I believe they call it. Is it on here? Band file, yep, okay. This is the Milwaukee band file. This actually works pretty good too. This is much quieter than this, but this goes a lot faster than that. They advertise that as the fastest spot weld cutter. Bull honky. This guy does. Although this guy is very good too, but you go through a lot more bands on this than you would just replacing the wheels on this. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you what I do real quick. First off, this I just picked, this is the random area that I picked because it was right in front of me. But we know there's spot welds here. Not all the time they're visible. So usually what I'll do is I'll go in here with this. I will soften the paint. This doesn't hurt the metal, it doesn't do anything like that. It just softens the paint. Then we got our wire wheel. Look at that. See how that just exposed all those spot welds right there in no time. There's one more tool I use quite often when tearing apart the spot welds on a car, and I mostly use this when I don't care about the panel that's underneath the one that I'm trying to remove, and that is just a drill bit. They're cheap, they work fast, blows right through it, and yes, it ruins the bottom panel, but when you're not trying to save it or it's junk anyway, who cares? So yes, the drill bit works quite often. And this is something I have tried to use, but, well, just to put it short, it's crap. And this is a drill bit spot weld cutter. So this is actually, let me try and clean this off real quick. There we go. So this actually is a spot weld cutter drill bit. And I haven't had any success with these. I mean, I've had 2 of them now, brand new. Even with cutting fluid, I mean, I'm lucky if I can get like 15 spot welds with this thing and they're done. And that is because rust kills drill bits. So I try and not use this guy. This is the nice Blair spot weld cutter. This is probably the best thing for drilling spot welds out and having a flush cut. So, but you don't want to use this on a rusty panel because it kills the bits. So that's when I use this guy, because the bits are cheap to replace and I really don't care. So this is the top of the rocker panel. I'm not saving this rocker, so that's probably why you see holes that I had just drilled in the door jamb right here. So I just straight drilled through these, drilled through there, because I don't care. I'm not saving the rocker. I'm saving the door jamb. So the door jamb will be removed off of the rocker. I'm just using the rocker to show different cuts that we can do right here. Now, I can see these spot welds pretty easy. I don't know how you can see them on camera, but you know, these are pretty clean, and usually on the tops of the seams here, they're easy to spot. It's the floor pan that they get hard, but I'm gonna go ahead and clean these up. This thing will go. There we go. And so you're not really getting it hot to do anything, you're just basically bubbling the paint. But I'm sure on camera now you can see those spot welds. Now, if you were wanting to save the back panel and just cut through the front one, this is what I would use the most, this guy right here. And I always use cutting fluid. It makes the bits last longer. But here is the problem with this guy. It likes to skip. Even though it's got a drill bit in the front of it, and it's spring loaded, but when you try and use it, so I'll start easy and go into it. It skips. That drill bit in the middle might as well be pointless. This is what I use with this. Yes, it's a 3/16 hole in the panel you're trying to save, but a 3/16 hole is easy to fill with one zap of the welder, so it's not a big deal. So that same hole, and you can do it like this too, where you can just start. Don't drill all the way through. Normally I have it set up on 2 different drills so I don't have to swap it, but this is just a show. And you gotta go slow with this. If you go fast, if you just go fast with it, you're gonna burn it up. So, another problem with this guy, this thing cuts fast and it cuts now. So you want to go slow and periodically check to make sure you just didn't blow right through it. See, now this is the one that I just kind of dimpled. You have to start off slower when you do this. But it does the same thing. Now that I've already, see, like right here, I'll go back to this one. If I didn't periodically check and I'm going slow, it just blows a hole right through it. If you're going fast, this thing would went whoop, right through it, you're done. So, but you can either drill the hole or you can dimple it, so that way the spring-loaded drill bit has something to dig into, or to hold it steady. Because trying to drill a hole without anything, or trying to spot weld without anything, that's what you're going to be fighting. Alright, here's the second spot weld cutter, the cheaper hole saw version from Blair. Now this does work really good, but it does have the same flaw. So if you're trying to start with just this and it has that centering pin that's spring loaded, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to walk on you. So then you want to come back with a drill bit about the size of the spring-loaded pin. We'll do this two ways, just like the other one. We'll drill straight through it. Or we'll just create a dimple. You have to do either way. Otherwise, it's going to walk all over the place. Oh, almost forgot my fluid. There we go. This is the straight through hole. So you just got to periodically check so you don't go through both panels. That one's good. This is the dimple. They both do the same job. You do have to start slower on that one, otherwise it will walk on you. But both this guy and this guy work really well on saving the panel. The only reason I like this one better is because this one is a hole saw. So it creates that right, let me see if I can get closer with the camera there. So if you look, that stands off. Now there's a hump in the middle of that spot weld that you're going to have to grind off. Let's see. We'll go here. That is flush. That was cut with this guy. So that just creates a more flush spot weld, and it's easier to come through with the chisel and knock those out because it doesn't have that raised hump in the middle. So I'll show you this guy in just a minute. So you've got some spot welds cut out now. Now you can come in with the seam buster, the spot weld splitter, whatever they want to call it. This one here though, it's got a lot of miles on it. This one's pretty well chewed up. It's not as sharp as it used to be, and I actually just ordered another one this morning. Needed to order one for a while, but you know, you keep forgetting. See how it just goes in there and splits that seam? And now you've got those spot welds cut out. That one need to go the other side. There we go. See, part of the problem with doing this right here is the spot welds are high enough, and when you cut them, there's not really a lot of meat up here, so sometimes the top will split, which is kind of what I'm encountering right now. But normally this thing here, you just right through it, no problem. But since this is on the top of a rocker and there's not a whole lot of meat there, there's not a whole lot it can do to keep from splitting. Let's see, you just go down the line just like that. This thing is an awesome tool. If you don't have one, you need to get one. See, you also use this tool for going in and punching out what's left of the spot welds like I did here. The floor pan on top of the frame rails and everything, I just drilled those out. Why? because I didn't care about the panel underneath it. They were not being saved. The frame rails are not being saved. The rockers are not being saved. Anything that's not being saved, don't even waste your time with a spot weld cutter because it takes longer. Just ream that sucker out with a big old honking drill bit and be done with it. All right. Typically, most floor pans are rusty, and you can hardly see spot welds. You can see them up to about this point. You can see them there, but beyond that, they're pretty hard to see, and you really don't want to use a spot weld cutter because it is going to kill those things. So let's go ahead and clean this up. Alright, I didn't bother using the heat because this is just a tutorial and I can see where they're at. So there is some rust in there, so you're gonna kill the small drill bits. But in a scenario like this, I will use this guy if the torsion support underneath this. So this is a torsion support that the floor pan is welded to, and if that is in good shape, you don't want to just drill through this thing. So you can use a spot weld cutter on the areas up until I would say about here, because as soon as you start getting into the real rusty stuff, it's going to kill this thing. Same thing, we can drill right through it, or we can dimple it. Try and make a deep dimple, that way it's more steady when you're trying to use a spot weld cutter. Alright, we got our spring-loaded Blair flush cutter. That is perfect. Sometimes I'll actually waller it around. That seems to work pretty good. You gotta start off slower. Another perfect one. Now, you won't hear it too much on these, but when you get up into this area, well, up into that area, as you're cutting and you hear a tink, that's the two panels separating. That is you love to hear that sound when you're spot weld cutting. Here's the hole saw setup. You gotta start with a small drill bit, and I don't really like to use this too much because that's a very skinny drill bit. It's about a 1/16 of an inch, and they tend to break pretty easy. Can't put a lot of pressure on them either. All right, so that's the through one. This is the dimple. All right. Take out the flush cut. Put on the hole saw cutter. Perfect. Now here's the dimple. You gotta start off slower. Then once you feel it set, like it steadies up, then you can increase the speed a little bit. That one's perfect too. I mean, it's probably hard to tell by camera, but that one right there is perfect. These are the flush cuts. Those are perfectly flush. These ones here, same thing. They have that raised center because of the hole saw cutter. So that's why I like using those. It's less cleanup. If you did the whole floor pan in these guys, that's a lot of grinding versus these guys. And here's one of my most commons when you're taking apart rusty cars, because most of the time, everything underneath what you're removing is garbage. The drill bit. Done. All right, the next tool I use for the floor pans, and actually for a lot of the car. I'll show you other scenarios too. The 3-inch die grinder cutoff wheel. Yeah, this is my favorite, but I have to armor up for this one. It blows lots of sparks. So I got my welding forearm shield, and I got my gloves. Also, you'll notice at the new house I'm at, I still don't have concrete yet or a shop. So it's back to tent city and shade wherever I can get it. All right, we got a couple spot welds here. This one right here is a perfect scenario of a spot weld cutter killer. So I'll just go in here with this guy. And what's nice about using it like this is the spot weld actually kind of centers the cutoff wheel. I'll go in here and just cut that sucker out. Done. Look, I'll do another one. Dunzo. See, that 3-inch cutoff wheel cuts right through the rust in no problem. The only downfall with that tool is it is noisy and sparks go everywhere, especially if you're in a corner like this and you're cutting. The sparks go up, hit this wall, and come back at you. But this guy comes in handy a lot. I'll show you another scenario. So a lot of times on these old cars, you'll have a miscellaneous assortment of spot welds and MIG welds. This guy right there was a MIG weld, there was another MIG weld, there was another MIG weld, and they're like in these oval cutouts here. Let me get her. There you go. See how those are oval? So those spot welds were in there. Well, you can go in there with this guy and cut those suckers out. Also, on the A-pillar, yeah, the shade there. On the A-pillar, you'll have some MIG welds here. So you can go in there with, ooh, almost dropped it. Go in there with this guy and cut that out too. So yep, this is one of my most favorite tools when cutting apart a rusty junk car, but it only works in certain scenarios. If you're trying to save the panel that's on top, can't use this guy because it mutilates it. But if you're just trying to save the panel underneath it, this is perfect. All right, next is that most expensive tool. This was $275 just for the tool. No batteries, charger, no nothing. It's the Milwaukee band file. But this thing is pretty awesome. Not only does it come with a nifty light, but it gets into hard to reach areas. Like this thing came in handy getting that right there, or there's more spot welds down in, like that one right there. If I was trying to get that spot weld, I couldn't get it without cutting more metal out. I'd have to cut more metal out to get that. So with this long reach, now we just got that spot weld cut out. This thing does work pretty quick, but it's not as quick as that 3-inch whizzy wheel, cutoff wheel, air grinder, 90-degree grinder, whatever you want to call it. This thing works great on floor pans though. All right, so we got that guy right there. One downfall to this though, you don't want to use this on rust because the rust will kill the sandpaper that's on this thing. So you really want to just use it on paint and metal. Try not to use it on rust. That's why that 3-inch whizzy wheel is like the king of cutting spot welds in certain scenarios. But here we go. but look how good of a job it does. That is a flush ground down spot weld cutting demon. Pretty nifty, huh? Well, that's just a quick rundown of how I cut apart these cars and some of the tools I use. I mean, these are my favorites right here. I mean, the most common one I use, like, is the 3-inch Whizzy wheel, and then the flush cut spot weld cutter, and of course the regular drill bit. I use that thing a lot. And then my favorite tools, also the seam splitter, and I use this guy every now and then, not all the time, but I do use it. And then also the basic bottle torch with the wire wheel. It allows me to see all the spot welds that I might not have been able to see, cleans the paint off, light rust, and makes it to where the visibility of making sure I get my dimple or my pre-drilled hole right dead center of the spot weld. And each one of these tools doesn't have a very specific scenario of drilling them out. They can be used in multiple scenarios. Like these that were cut out right here, here's that panel, and I just used this guy because it's fast, it's easy, it's also noisy and blows a lot of sparks and burns your skin, but it's quick. You could also use the spot weld cutter. You could use pretty much everything here except for this guy, you know, because we don't want to drill a hole through the roof structure. We just want to take the outer layer off. And like when you're removing a roof skin, sometimes it makes it easier just to go ahead and take this guy and put a slice there. So that way, or not the roof skin, but the quarter panel. So when you pull the quarter panel out, that just relieves it a little bit. And you're gonna weld that whole area back up anyway, so it's no big deal and just stitching that back up when you get the quarter on. Well, I hope you guys learned something. Maybe I educated you guys a little bit on the different spot weld cutters and what I use. And it's really just at your discretion on what you want to use. I mean, there's all different ways to cut these cars apart, and sometimes I'll go different routes. I even use just a electric cutoff wheel a lot of times. Like this rocker here, wasn't worried about saving it, so pretty much just slice the area out of the way just so I can get to the spot welds that are underneath it. And like the inner wheelhouse. Okay, so I need to remove the quarter and the outer wheelhouse. Well, I'll go inside the wheel well and I'll slice right along the edge all the way, and then I'll go ahead, remove the quarter, the outer wheelhouse, and I'll just come up top here, drill these guys out. Because when I put the new one in there, I just grind this flush. Actually, this one here has kind of got some scaly to it, so this one here might need a little bit more work than that, but normally the inner wheelhouses are pretty decent, and you can usually just grind that back to where it's flush, clean this edge up, and then you can weld the new one right to that. Or you can take the time and drill out all the spot welds that hold this thing together. You know, how far do you want to go? And this door jamb was no good, but I had to get rid of the door jamb, and there was no fancy way to do it. It was just quick cut, hammer, and slice the thing out of the way, just so I can use the 3-inch Whizzy wheel on that one, spot weld, spot weld, spot weld, and then use the seam buster to cut them apart. My seam buster is getting pretty dull though. It kind of rips and tears versus just, rips and tears a little bit instead of just slicing right through. So that's why the new one's on order. But anyway, guys, I got to get back to ripping this thing apart, because by the end of the day, the only thing that's savable on this car is the roof structure, the rear seat pan, the package tray, the inner wheel well, and the rear window regulator panel, and only one door jamb. The rest of this 70 Charger going in the dumpster, including the entire front clip. It's all junk. Look at this. All the scaliness. By the time I got this thing blasted, there would be so many pinholes and so many rod holes, it's not even worth my time to try and cut it apart. So really, I have gone in here, cut the cowl out of the way, just so I can drill out all the spot welds and MIG welds, so that way, see, my A-pillar is loose. That A-pillar's loose. But before I remove it, I gotta go get some steel and jig it up, and then just that way it doesn't distort or get bent while it's on the trailer or something. But yep, this guy here, gonna be cut apart. No, actually, you know what? I am gonna save those console brackets, and not gonna save the 4-speed hump, because you're only seeing the good part of it. The other side is completely junk. Alrighty, guys, see ya.